You know what the problem is with humans? Zork, the most senior intelligence officer of the Galactic High Command, stared at his monitors, fingers twitching above a holoscreen as he spoke. The rest of the council waited for the usual tirade about the dangerous unpredictability of humanity. Every single species in the galaxy had long since acknowledged the threat humans posed, but there was no agreement on how to approach them. Zorka's words were always a mix of annoyance and admiration for a species that had become the galaxy's most elusive enigma. Their restraint, Zork said, his voice filled with frustration. I'm not sure how much longer we can rely on it. Across the round table, various alien species blinked, their eyes adjusting to the flickering light that danced across the room from the holographic displays. Some were reptilian, others insectoid in shape, their eyes unreadable beneath layers of complex biology. But they all shared a common expression now: confusion, disbelief. Zork continued, pulling up a series of intercepted transmissions, each one more troubling than the last. A garbled message, part of an encrypted military conversation, flashed across the screen, revealing a chilling snippet from a human officer. If we ever actually tried, the war would be over in a day. The silence in the room was instant, suffocating, and oppressive. The implications were immediate and horrifying. For years, the galaxy had assumed that humans were a threat on par with their reputation: resilient, clever, and fiercely independent. But this suggested that the humans hadn't even been trying. And worse, they knew it. They were holding back. Do you think they know what they're doing? A voice asked from the far side of the room. Zork glanced at the speaker. Ultra, a giant from the Chirix species, had always been something of an optimist, or at least a hopeful idiot, depending on who you asked. But even Ultra's deep voice cracked now as his eyes widened. They know what they're doing, Zork muttered, and they've been doing it for far too long. Another officer, this one from the Zorgan race, leaned forward, his multi-lensed eyes narrowing. But how do you know? What if it was just a misunderstanding? What if it was an accident? Or do you think the humans accidentally overran the Fralian outpost 3 weeks ago? Zork cut him off sharply. The Zorgan officer recoiled. What about the Detrosia fleet last year? What about the Goxalian retreat after the skirmish at System 12? The room stilled as the images of those incidents flashed up, all too familiar. Each time, the humans had won, and each time, they had deliberately stopped short of utter destruction. A ceasefire, an impromptu truce, or even just an inconspicuous withdrawal. But always, with the message loud and clear. We could have finished this, but we chose not to. Zork punched a command into his console, and a new transmission appeared. It was another intercepted signal from a human base, this time in the middle of a training exercise. Yeah, we're doing fine. Not going full doom mode yet, but it's going to be close if we get the green light. Full doom mode? Someone asked from the council's side. A wave of murmurs spread. Some alien leaders began shifting uncomfortably. The word doom mode was hardly reassuring in this context. Enough of this, Zork snapped. It's clear. We need answers, and we need them now. There's only one way to figure out what the humans are actually capable of, and that's to get someone on the ground, in person. Infiltrate Earth. We need to know everything. The room was silent again. The council exchanged nervous glances, and a general sense of dread settled over the group. Do we have anyone in mind? Ultra asked quietly. Zork stared at the holographic displays, now buzzing with data about Earth. Yes, someone discreet. There was a long pause before the voice of Garth, an officer from the Orion Dominion, broke the silence. What if we're wrong? What if they're not as dangerous as we think? What if they're not holding back at all? What if this is just another elaborate ruse, a show for their own amusement? Zork turned slowly to Garth. What if, he said, you were wrong about the last 5 battles? What if that was all a ruse too? The chill settled over the room. No one dared speak again. Finally, Zork addressed the council with the coldest resolution he could muster. Prepare the mission. We send someone to Earth. It's our only chance to find out if humanity is playing a game we can't win, or if they've been holding back this entire time." He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "I suggest you all pray for the latter. Because if we're wrong—" He let the sentence hang. The doors slid shut behind him, and the weight of his words lingered in the air. A sense of foreboding crept into the minds of every officer present. And somewhere, far away, humans went about their business. Venal had never been particularly comfortable with infiltrations. He was a scout, yes, but more of a logistical one, carefully moving unnoticed in the shadows. This mission was different. This was Earth, the one place no one had ever truly understood. And now, he was about to find out why. Venal's disguise wasn't much: an ill-fitting uniform from one of the Earth's lesser militaries and a face he'd studied for days. He hoped the humans would find him convincing enough to avoid suspicion. But he wasn't here to fit in. He was here to learn the truth, to find out exactly how dangerous they were. His shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, the familiar turbulence shaking the vessel as it broke through the clouds. Venal gripped the controls tightly, cursing his own luck. If he was wrong about this, if Earth wasn't what the Council feared, well, he wasn't sure what would be worse. The humiliation of a botched mission, or the realization that the humans had been pretending all this time. The shuttle touched down with a soft thud. Venal felt his heart race. He knew it was just the beginning. Getting on Earth was easy. Staying undetected was the challenge. But Earth wasn't as simple as he'd assumed. He'd arrived at a military base, a tiny outpost far from any major conflict zones. Still, he expected more. More caution. More preparedness. Instead, he was greeted by a group of human soldiers lounging outside a mess hall, exchanging banter as though it were just another day at work. "Think they'll give us more than just hot dogs today?" one of the soldiers joked, tossing a can into a recycling bin with remarkable precision. His uniform was stained with grease and dirt, but his smile was wide, like the whole war effort was nothing but a joke. Venal froze, narrowing his eyes. They didn't seem nervous. They didn't even seem prepared. This was a war zone, wasn't it? He approached cautiously, trying to blend in. The soldiers barely paid him any mind, too engrossed in their casual conversation. "I'm telling you, Mike, if they knew what we could do, they'd be begging us to go easy on them." One of them laughed. Venal's eyes narrowed further. He had to be hearing things. Was he really talking about war like it was some game? He didn't dare approach them, but stayed back, listening. A few yards away, a group of officers gathered in a circle, discussing strategy, or so it seemed. Venal leaned in closer to hear. The lead officer, a gruff-looking man with a thick beard, was speaking. "You know, if we ever actually tried, we could wipe out half their fleet in an hour," he said, gesturing to the others. "But, you know, we don't really go all in unless we have to. Call it strategy, I guess." Venal's breath caught in his throat. Did he just say that? The words hit him like a hammer. The humans weren't hiding some weapon of mass destruction. They weren't building a secret fleet to crush their enemies. They were playing a game they could win with no effort at all. The human officer caught sight of Venal, standing off to the side. His eyes flicked toward the alien for a split second before returning to the conversation. "So, you heard the rumors, right?" the officer said with a laugh. "Some people think we've got all this crazy tech, like some end-of-the-world stuff. But trust me, it's mostly just paperwork wars and some spicy food. And yeah, our guns can blow stuff up, but they're not even trying to. Not like they could." Venal's blood ran cold. The human didn't sound afraid. He sounded almost bored. This wasn't a situation of hiding a dangerous species behind a wall of secrecy. No, this was something else entirely. The officer slapped his friend on the back. "Hey, remember that time we almost blew up the whole enemy fleet? Good times. But we didn't, right? Because we don't need to. We're just that good." Venal fought the urge to retreat into the shadows. If there was any hope of getting the intel the council had demanded, it was slipping away. He was watching an entire species laugh about not using their full power, like it was a joke. Venal finally decided it was time to leave. The longer he stayed, the worse it got. The whole planet seemed to be nothing more than an elaborate farce, a mockery of every other war effort in the galaxy. It wasn't the human strength that scared him. It was their disinterest. He made his way to a nearby military bar, hoping to find more serious conversations, maybe some shred of the fear that should have accompanied such power. Instead, he found a group of drunken Marines, lounging around, their laughter loud and boisterous. "Hey, remember when we almost nuked the whole Gorlak system?" One of them asked, his words slurred but enthusiastic. The others cheered. "Oh yeah, but we didn't," another added, "because we're not those guys. We don't even try half the time." Venal's head spun. The room was full of them, soldiers who had single-handedly turned the tide of battle, who could have obliterated an entire enemy fleet with a simple hand signal. And yet, here they were, trading war stories like they were talking about a bad day at the office. A few of the Marines caught Venal staring. One of them leaned over and grinned. "Hey, you looking for some real war stories, buddy?" he asked. Venal took a step back, almost tripping over his own feet as he stumbled toward the door. "No," he said quickly. "I've seen enough." He rushed outside, the air hitting him like a slap in the face. What had he walked into? He couldn't fathom it. The humans weren't merely holding back. They weren't even aware of the danger they posed. This wasn't a war. This was an elaborate game, and they were laughing at the rest of the galaxy. If there was any hope of stopping them, of saving face, it had to happen now. Venal's fingers hovered over his communicator, but before he could send a report, something inside him froze. He realized, too late, that no one would believe him. The truth was too ridiculous. He was running out of time. And if the council learned what he had, there might not be enough time to stop the madness. Venal's shuttle shot through the atmosphere, leaving Earth behind in a trail of burning fury. His mind raced, still reeling from what he'd seen. The humans, the ones every species in the galaxy had feared, had barely even taken their own capabilities seriously. They didn't use full force, because they didn't need to. They didn't even consider the possibility of unleashing their true power. To them, the war was a game, a diversion. The concept that the galaxy feared them was met with disdain, like it was some absurd joke. When Venal had first learned of the mission, he'd thought he'd be uncovering secrets, new weapons, strategies, resources. But instead, he'd found a people who didn't care, who weren't worried, who had been sitting on the most potent weapon in the galaxy, and all they did was laugh about it. The mission had been a disaster, a total failure. When Venal arrived back at the Galactic High Command, he knew things were about to get ugly. The council room was buzzing with activity, but a heavy, suffocating tension hung in the air. They were already on edge after the last few reports about Earth. Now, they were desperate to know how far the humans were willing to go. What would happen if the humans ever decided to play serious? Venal's boots clicked against the polished floor as he stepped forward. The eyes of the council were on him, piercing through his armor, waiting for him to speak. They didn't know what he had seen. No one did, but his report could turn the tide for the entire galaxy. He took a deep breath, standing tall in front of them. "The humans," he started, but his voice faltered for a moment. This wasn't what he had expected to say. It wasn't what anyone had expected. "They're not afraid. In fact, they're laughing at us." The room fell silent. The High Command's officials exchanged confused glances, their faces contorting as if they hadn't heard him correctly. "What do you mean, Venal?" One of the senior officers demanded. "We know the humans are dangerous, but you're saying they're, what, overconfident?" Venal hesitated, then nodded. "They don't even try. They don't need to. They're soldiers, they're generals, they treat war like it's some kind of game. I spent time with them, watched them train. They could wipe us out in a heartbeat. They just don't." Not unless they have to. They see our best efforts as a joke. The officers exchanged whispers, a murmur of disbelief rising among them. Venal could see it in their faces. They didn't understand. No one did. The humans had been holding back this whole time, like a kid pretending to be weak just to get a laugh. It was absurd. What's their reasoning? Another officer asked, his voice filled with skepticism. Why? Why not destroy us all if they have the power? Venal shifted uneasily. They don't care. They see it as too much trouble. They don't see us as a threat. It's like, he faltered again, struggling for words. It's like we're nothing more than a minor nuisance. They've got weapons beyond anything we could imagine, but they're too busy joking about paperwork and hot dogs to actually use them. The room went dead silent. Venal could feel their eyes burning into him, disbelief turning into sheer panic. They had all been prepared for war. Everyone had assumed that humans were dangerous because of their technology, their strength, their will to conquer. But now it was clear, the humans weren't dangerous because of those things. They were dangerous because they didn't care. A cold sweat dripped down Venal's back. The High Command was taking the news hard. Too hard. Get the ambassador, one of the officers said suddenly. Now, we need to end this before they do decide to try. Before they realize how bad it could get for us. Get the ambassador? Another officer asked in disbelief. For what? They're joking, Venal. You're telling us they've been playing us for years? Venal nodded, feeling a strange sense of dread wash over him. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. They've been holding back, and if they ever decide to stop, we're done. The panic was spreading quickly now. The officers stood, hurriedly calling for urgent transmissions, scrambling to reach Earth's ambassador before they could make a catastrophic mistake. The peace treaty, the one that had been under negotiation for years, was about to take a drastic turn, and no one was ready for it. Meanwhile, on Earth, everything seemed normal. The humans continued their everyday routines, treating war like it was just another part of life to be tolerated. In a meeting room at the United Nations, a human ambassador prepared for what he assumed would be another round of tedious diplomacy. He was unaware of the chaos unfolding in the galaxy above. The peace treaty was about to take a bizarre turn. Ambassador Charles Rose sat behind a simple wooden desk, flipping through papers as he waited for the alien delegates to arrive. He had just come off a grueling meeting about trade deals with the Gorlak, a species known for their awkwardly formal negotiations. This was supposed to be just another round of talks, nothing more. Then the door opened, and the alien delegates arrived. Their faces were solemn, and their eyes burned with a strange urgency. Ambassador Rowe, one of them said, their voice stilted, almost fearful. We come to you with terms of peace. We have seen the dangers your people pose, and we are prepared to sign a treaty to prevent further hostilities. Rowe blinked, confused. Dangers? Hostilities? What are you talking about? One of the aliens leaned forward, clearly trying to maintain a sense of control. We have come to realize that your people are not what we believed. You, humans, are unlike any other species we have encountered. We respect your power, your wisdom, your restraint. But now we must ask, will you agree to the terms of this treaty? Or do we face a future where we are nothing more than a minor nuisance to you? Rose scratched his head, completely bewildered. He had no idea where this was coming from. Look, guys, I don't know what you're. The alien stopped him with a sharp gesture. Please, Ambassador, for the sake of the galaxy, we beg you to sign the treaty. We don't know what you're capable of, but we fear it will be our undoing if you ever choose to demonstrate it. Rowe leaned back in his chair. His fingers drummed on the desk as he tried to piece together the situation. He wasn't sure if this was some kind of joke, or if they were seriously panicking over something that didn't even make sense. Okay, Rose said, leaning forward with a smile. I'll sign your treaty, sure. But just so you know, we don't really care if you sign it or not. The alien ambassador blinked. What? Rose's grin widened. Yeah, I mean, we've got bigger fish to fry back home, you know? It's nice that you're worried, but you don't have to be. We're just not really in the mood to go full doom mode, if you catch my drift." The aliens exchanged nervous glances, eyes wide with terror. One of them stammered, "You weren't going to?" Rose shrugged casually. "Nah, we don't really try unless we have to. It's not that we couldn't wipe out an entire fleet in a day, but you guys seem nice enough. Who needs the trouble, right?" The peace treaty was signed, and the galaxy, for the first time, realized that the humans were something no one had ever expected, too big a threat to ignore, too disinterested to even care. As the aliens sighed in relief, their greatest fear had just come true. The humans didn't just hold back. They had never considered the war to be real in the first place. And the treaty was signed. Forever.